The woods are home to all kinds of creatures and nightmares. Personally, I love the great outdoors and all it has to offer. Not everyone has a great relationship with the trees, though. The subscriber sent in their allegedly true stories while exploring deep in the woods. Before I go any further, I do need to mention I am currently feeling under the weather, and my voice may not be normal. I was going to rest, but honestly, I haven't missed an upload in 2 years and I don't think I can miss one for you guys. So please, enjoy these stories. If you have a story you would like to share on the show, be sure to send it in at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Now, let's get into these allegedly true, scary stories from the woods. This happened a few years ago, and I'm not sure what to think of it. I've heard stories about them, but I had no clue how truly unnerving they could be. And by they, I mean the stairs. If you haven't heard of them, picture taking a set of stairs from a house and just stick them in a desolate, forested area. Strange, right? Like, who would build a staircase in the middle of the woods? However, I'm not sure that someone built them. I don't know why, but I feel like they're not made by human hands. There's something about them that just feels so unnatural. I work on and around a military installation surrounded by dense woods. I've seen strange things in the woods before, but something about this seriously bothers me. A coworker and I were on our way to a firing range to repaint some bleachers. To get there, we had to drive down a long remote trail through the woods. We were about 4 miles from our destination when I spotted something through the trees and bushes. I told my coworker, who I'll call Justin, to stop the truck so I could check it out. I got out of the truck about 80 yards away. I could see a small, wooden structure peeking through the trees. The more closer I got, the more I realized this wasn't small, but it was very big. I told Justin to wait in the car, and that it wouldn't take long. I trudged through fallen limbs and bushes towards the structure. As I came closer, I realized what it was. What in the hell? I said to myself. The stairs were white on the sides with a red carpet running up the 12 steps. As I got closer, I noticed that there was absolutely no dirt or leaves on it. Why is this here? Did the soldiers do this? Why is it so clean? So many questions were going through my mind. I took my phone out to get some pictures of it, but every time I opened my camera, it would immediately close out. I then reached out to touch it. I know it was a stupid idea, but I was so intrigued at the moment. The moment I laid my fingers on the carpet, the entire world went silent. Birds stopped chirping, the wind stopped blowing, even my own breathing was silenced. The only thing I could hear was a low humming sound, followed by a voice. The voice was incoherent. It sounded like it was being spoken in a language I've never heard before. Suddenly, I was quickly spun around to face Justin, who was yelling at me. However, I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was this strange low voice. For a few seconds, I could understand it. The only part I could make out was, "The dreams will guide you." Then all of this normal sounds started coming back. I could hear the sounds of the woods again. My breathing returned and Justin's voice came through. "Ryan, what the hell's wrong with you?" I asked him what he was talking about. He explained to me that he had been hearing a strange growling sound and voices, so he came looking for me only to find me standing there next to the stairs, shaking with my eyes rolled back into my head. He said that he'd been looking for me for 30 minutes. When he finally found me, I was unresponsive and babbling something. I felt like I had only been there for a few minutes, and I wasn't talking at all from my knowledge. We turned around to look at the stairs again, but oddly enough, they were gone. All that was left was the imprint of the heavy steps in the dirt where it was standing. It wasn't my imagination, I'm sure of that, because I have a witness. Before I begin, I want to say I have absolutely no intentions to scare people away from this organization. If you ever have a chance to volunteer with these folks, I highly encourage it. It is nothing short of wonderful. Every year, starting about 2 years ago, I have volunteered with the Sweep the Hooch program here in Georgia, ran by the Chattahoochee Riverkeepers. This program is made up of volunteers that clean up one of Georgia's major watersheds, the Chattahoochee River. As a brand new fisheries biology major and serious outdoorsman, this watershed means a lot to me. So I decided to take part in these massive cleanups. This most recent cleanup was a serious turn of events, however. I started off at about 8 in the morning, and I got checked in at my cleanup location. I met the leader of our group, unloaded my fishing kayak, and took a restroom break since I would be on the water for the next 4 hours paddling down the Chattahoochee. After unloading my kayak, I drove my truck 4 miles down the river, where my group would get out of the water after our long paddle. While we were waiting to be shuttled back up to our initial launch spot, I noticed that the group was preparing to paddle in front of us. This group was starting their paddle right where you would get out of the river. This is very important. We then took a shuttle van ran by the local guide service back to our kayaks and began our paddle to the hooch. We found tons of trash, and we were fortunate enough to get a lot of it out of the river. In fact, I found so much that I was afraid my kayak would capsize due to the amount of trash I had in it. The cleanup was great, and I made a lot of new friends and met some really cool people during the cleanup. It was a lot of fun, and I wish that I could go back and relive that day. After we exited, I loaded up my kayak, said bye to everyone, and hit the road. I was reflecting on the day and how great it was. Come the next day, and I was talking to my parents about the cleanup and how well it had gone. My mom all of a sudden turned around and said something that made my heart start beating 1,000,000 miles per minute. She said, "They found a body in the river the day of the cleanup, Kevin." "What?" I said. She repeated herself, and I was blown away. I asked her where the body was found, and she told me. I couldn't believe it. It was found by that group that was going right in front of us a few more miles. It's absolutely crazy and terrifying to think about how, if I would have paddled just a few more miles, I could have been finding a dead body. The team called the police and the fire department. They all came and removed the body from the river. It was all pretty crazy. Now that I think about it, it still creeps me out. I know it's not the craziest story you've ever read, but I thought you'd like to share it. A few years back, my friends Jeff, Gabe, and I decided to take a hike in a secluded area we weren't too familiar with. I was 16 at the time. Jeff was 18 and Gabe was 19. We were all into photography, so we were hoping to get to the top of the mountain just as the sun was setting to get some good shots. We turned on some music and generally just relaxed on the way up. We saw a few groups of people on the way up, all of which warned us to get off the mountain before dusk, as bears and mountain lions were prominent in the area. We didn't take them too seriously and continued up the mountain until we reached the summit and got our pictures. They didn't turn out all that great, and since the trail was a loop, we decided to follow the loop in hopes of getting a better angle. What we didn't realize was that the loop was several miles long and it would take us way beyond nightfall to get back down. By the time we realized our mistake, it was far too late. We were in the middle of the Colorado wilderness with nothing to guide us but our phone flashlights. Eventually, my speaker died, and as it did, all three of us immediately noticed a bizarre, almost surreal silence. At this point, we are more than just a little freaked out, and I decide to hold the small pocket knife I'd been carrying in my fist in an attempt to comfort myself. The silence was short-lived and was broken within minutes by the sound of heavy boots on the gravel. A figure appeared over the hill. As I came closer, I noticed a few weird things about it. At the time, I thought it was a man, but now looking back on it, I'm not so sure. He was walking in the pitch black without any sort of light. He had a black bandana covering his lower face, and he was walking very slowly and deliberately. As he passed, I muttered, an audibly nervous, "Hey." He never responded, nor did he even glance in our direction. It was like we didn't even exist to him. The night air was chilly, but I swore it felt like it dropped a few degrees when he was near. We picked up our pace and did not dare to look for several minutes. By the time we worked up the courage to look back, he was already gone. We tried to explain it for each other's comfort, but we all knew it wasn't that simple. By the time we were getting close to the bottom of the mountain, we had calmed down a bit, but that didn't last long either. There was only one car in the parking lot and it was ours, meaning there was no way anyone else was up on the mountain. We left in quite a rush, and still, to this day, I get goosebumps thinking about the entire ordeal. What do you guys think it was? Was it a ghost or simply some sort of homeless hiker? My name is Clara. I live in the upper state of Michigan and I love to hike along with some camping and hunting. I went out one day with my stepdad to go hunting so we could catch us some deer and whatnot. Once we got to the location where we went to go hunt, we packed up our gear we had brought from our house. I smelled something foul like a pile of garbage or rotting fish mixed with some really bad body odor. We ignored it at first as we thought it was something dead laying around nearby. We made our way through the woods onto a beaten down path we had found close by. Once we got quite a ways in, we stopped and took a couple of minutes to chill. After we took our small break, we heard a huge crack in the background behind some large bushes. My stepdad instinctively grabbed his sidearm from his holster, and that is when whatever it was growled at us and sped off. Whatever it was sounded huge and very, very fast. We, of course, ignored it but hiked even faster to where we needed to go, thinking it was just some sort of bear or something. Once we got there, we set up camp and started to make lunch. We had a hot dog and a side of salad as we ate. I started to smell that putrid smell again, which almost made me vomit my food right back out. I had to pee, so I went off. With it being near dusk, I grabbed a flashlight and a hunting knife. I always brought my hunting knife with me just in case. I squatted down as I was about to take a pee until I saw something move in the distance. I shined my flashlight at whatever was moving. I could see orange or red glowing eyes shining as I stared. I started becoming scared when I was looking at it. I pulled my pants back up and ran to the camp. I told my dad about what happened and he went to check it out. After a couple of minutes, I heard a loud scream the direction my dad had walked off. He ran back panicking real bad with blood oozing down his knee. I asked him what happened, but he stayed silent. He packed up our stuff as fast as he could, and we walked fast back to the truck. Once we got halfway there, we heard a loud call from something I've never heard before. At that moment, we started running as fast as we could, nearly tripping over roots until after a couple of minutes or so, we finally made it back to the truck. We packed everything up and sped off. We came home and went straight to sleep, but before that, I saw his knee, which looked like it was bit by something. I'm not sure what the hell was out there, but we haven't spoken about it since, and I just can't get him to tell me what he saw. I kind of have an inkling it might be a Bigfoot or something like that, but I would love to hear your guys' opinions in the comments. This happened a long time ago. I was 12 and in my grandparents' village. We had a cow and an ox. Usually the son of the bull, usually just one, took all the cattle to graze, and at night, he would take them back. Cows know where to go when going home. My grandpa had a male ox, and since my father was an adult, he wasn't there, so I had to take the responsibility. Basically, my job was to go around the village with the ox, trailing after me, calling the people to open their doors. Our ox would grunt to call the herd and all the females came out. From then on, I have to take them to a clearing up the mountain and then later take them to the river. It was easy. The animals already knew where they were going. They were calm and our bull was a gentle giant. I will admit, I did ride him and have a thin rope on his horns. If any of the females wandered off, all I did was call or, in rare occasions, poke her with a dull stick on the right direction. My grandpa said that if I see a wolf, which is very rare, a boar, or a fox, I should stay on the ox. Not many animals dare to go near an ox herd. There is a dark part of the forest where it is very, very quiet, and even the bravest of hunters won't go there. It is very slippery and dangerous. They said that even the deer and boar do not dare to go there. I was forbidden to go there and honestly never wanted to. It was early morning and everything seemed fine. I was on the ox going up the mountain. I was glad he let me because it was hard to trek up. I saw that one of the females was wandering off. I followed her and left our ox and the dogs to guide the herd. She went into the forest and I ran to her trying to find her. I ran to her and got on to tying the rope with her horns. I tried steering her away, but she continued. She went into the dark part and stopped. I didn't want to get off in case she ran back and left me there. I heard a crunch and turned. A very old man was walking towards us. He looked frail with dirty clothes and a long beard. I was scared, so I laid on the ox clinging to her, not wanting to fall if she ran. Oxen aren't like bulls. They don't jump and kick when scared. They either attack with their horns or trample. I was ready to hold on no matter what she chose. Our oxen don't take kindly to strangers. Before I took them out, I had to go to every house and have the ox owner introduce me to the animal. That way, they saw that their owner trusts me and that their herd leader, our ox, trusts me. I knew she would either attack or bolt. However, she just stood there. The stranger came to us and patted her on the head, whispering something I didn't understand. He looked at me. His eyes were completely white. Then, he turned around and left. He just disappeared in the trees. Suddenly, the female grunted as if it had been woken up from some deep sleep, and bolted the way we came from. We found the herd, and I quickly got on our ox and yelled, "Water!" He knew that command and went down towards the river. There were houses there, and it was closer than home. I barged in one of the houses and tried to explain. The couple there stayed with me and sent their daughter to call my grandpa. I couldn't sleep for days remembering those white eyes. My grandparent didn't let me out of the house or anything like that for a while, and I wasn't even allowed near trees. Later I learned that they were protecting me from a lesnik, a forest spirit which can take a form of a man, an owl, or a wolf. It hates when people go in this part of the woods and can kidnap you. I later learned that the ox which took me there had fallen ill and died. It sometimes stays in the trees as an owl looking for the offender. For years, when I went back to my grandparents, they wouldn't let me be alone. Not just outside, but inside too. I am never going in those woods again. So this happened to me a few days ago. I would like to think about camping deep in the woods, and eventually I finally went. I brought all my camping and hiking gear with me. The location I was in was in a deep forest in West Virginia. It's a really good hunting spot because I used to hunt a lot of big white-tailed deer out there. Somewhere around 1 o'clock I started hiking. After hiking for about 2 hours, I decided to set up camp because in the morning I wanted to keep going further into the forest. Once I had my camp set up, I started gathering up some wood for a campfire. After starting my fire, I got a pack of hot dogs out of my backpack and started roasting them over the fire. That's when I started hearing leaves crunching in the distance. I got up and looked around, but I didn't see anything. I figured it was probably just an animal, and seeing as it was starting to get dark by now, I decided to go ahead and go to bed. Once I fell asleep, I slept straight through the night completely undisturbed. As I was waking up the next morning though, I heard the most ear-piercing scream I've ever heard in my life. I jumped out of my camp with a small pistol, and I looked around for a good 15 minutes. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon something. It was an old ripped-up piece of clothing, and it had a bunch of bloodstains on it. The more disturbing thing was, the bloodstains were still moist. I continued my search until I found something terrifying. It was a human hand. The skin was half ripped up, and there were what looked like teeth marks all over it. There was also blood all over the ground. After seeing that, I ran back to my camp and started packing my stuff up. I wasn't about to continue hiking or camping in these woods after seeing that. No way. As soon as I was finished packing, I began to hike back to my car. I was making good time until I heard the same ear-piercing scream in the distance. At this point, I was freaking out, and now I was pretty much running back to my car. After a good 20 minutes of running off and on, I made it to my car, threw my stuff in the back, and got the heck out of Dodge. I have not been back there since. I'm still really creeped out about what happened. I really don't know what tore that person apart or what it was that made that scream. If anybody has any information about that, please let me know. And by the way, yes, I did report the body. Well, the hand anyway. I'm not sure if they ever found it or whatever came of it though. This odd memory of mine I've been thinking about a lot recently because of some news on the Delphi murder. As the man I'm talking about looks similar to the sketch that was put out. This was 20 years ago, and that sketch is probably irrelevant though. When I was around 12 years old, I lived in Flagstaff, Arizona. If you're not familiar with this part of Arizona, it's not what you think of when you think of Arizona. It's a ponderosa pine forest with mountains, and it snows in the winter. Anyway, across the street from my home was an entrance to some woods with paths. As my parents worked and I was the first one home after school, it was my responsibility to walk the dog. Usually I would take him just inside the woods entrance so I wouldn't have to pick up his crap out of the rocks that people out west cover their yards with. Usually, I was too scared to go into the actual woods, even with my dog because he was stronger than me and didn't listen to me. There were other reasons I didn't like the woods. Wolves, packs of wild hogs, even packs of wild dogs sometimes, and even cattle. Seriously, yeah, we had wild cows. Of course, I thought it was haunted as well. But this day, I guess I felt adventurous and took him on a walk into the woods. We went pretty deep that day and didn't see another soul because it was about 3 p.m. and people were at work. Neighborhood kids didn't really hang out back there either. Now my dog was excited by anything that moved and always wanted to greet another person, cat or dog. But this day, on the way back, I remember him being steadfast, still pulling and walking me along. On the way back home, ignoring squirrels and trees blowing in the wind. Then out of nowhere, a man appeared on the trail in front of me. Now, when I say out of nowhere, that's exactly what I meant. The woods here are not really dense, and usually you can see people from a good distance away. The man was dressed head to toe in brown and tan colors and gave a weak, "Hey," and did not make eye contact. The way the man dressed struck me as odd because it seemed like he was very outdated in his clothes. It just looked like something from like the 60s or something. As he passed, I took a few more steps and I turned around because he made me uneasy, and he's now behind me. But he was gone. I could probably see 50 feet of the trail ahead of me and behind me, and there's no reason I should not be able to see him still. My kid brain started going. Maybe he's a ghost. No. Maybe he's just hiding. There's no way I wouldn't be able to see him though, after he immediately passed me. Maybe he was hiding in front of me before he came out of nowhere. Maybe that's why he was wearing all brown, to blend in. My dog didn't want to greet him like everyone else in the world though, which really struck me as odd. It didn't take long for my dog and I to take off running and ran all the way home. Thank God I had my big goofy dog with me, because he was pretty aloof, but also protective. For all I know, maybe disappearing woodsman watched me take my dog out every day and saw me wander in that day. I know I let my dog crap in the yard for a few months after that. This happened a couple years ago. I wanted to go to the local wildlife trail to walk in the woods. I had gone several times to hike and jog. I normally went with my boyfriend at the time, but he was working when I wanted to go. I just decided to go by myself. I felt pretty comfortable doing this as I've done it many times. I parked at the far end of the parking lot in case anybody else would show up. The trail continues straight from the parking lot for about a mile until it curves up a large hill. Where I wanted to go was the abandoned parking lot with a lake. The turnoff for this part of the trail was about 400 yards down the trail on the left. Once you turn left, you have about 200 yards of flat trail before it inclined. The inclined section is loose gravel and is quite noisy when you're walking up it. This section lasts for no more than 100 yards. I felt pretty at ease going along the straight trail before I turned left. When I hit the incline though, I began to feel uneasy. At first, I brushed it off as being overly paranoid and continued on. As I was about halfway up the incline, I began to hear crunching and snapping of trees in the woods to my right. It sounded like it was around 100 yards off. It was just far enough in the woods that I probably couldn't see what was making the noise. I froze in my tracks, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I stood still as I heard the crunching stop abruptly. Being stupid, I brushed it off as a deer or a bobcat. In my mind, the crunching was much too loud to be a raccoon or a squirrel. I continued up the path until I hit the end of the incline. That's when I heard the thing in the woods begin to run at me. I was frozen in fear. My heart was beating 1,000,000 miles an hour, and every hair on my body was standing straight up. I honestly felt like I was rooted in place. That's when I saw him. A man was running straight for me while holding something in his right hand. I began to run down the incline back on the main trail. I was slipping and sliding down the gravel. I looked behind me and he was now at the top of the incline. He had this honestly evil and satanic look in his eyes. I noticed the item in his hand was a very large knife. I almost slipped due to me looking back at this guy. He called out to me, "Get back here!" His tone was malicious and downright scary. I sprinted as fast as I could and took a hard right back onto the main path. When I hit the parking lot, I didn't look back. I unlocked my car and started it as quickly as I could. Right as I was backing up, he emerges from the trail entrance. He just stood there, partially covered in the shade of trees. As I am tearing through the parking lot and onto the highway, he's just staring at me. The biggest, creepiest smile I've ever seen comes across his face though. He slowly waves at me as I get onto the highway. Until this day, I have never gone back to that trail, not even with my boyfriend. That encounter has scarred me for life when it comes to hiking in the woods. I know a lot of people are going to ask, but no, I did not call the police or file a report. It's a very stupid thing to do, I know, but I felt like it's just not worth it because what are they going to do? The nearest police station was well over 40 minutes away, so by the time they would even arrive, the man would probably be gone. Looking back, I still should have filed a report, and it still has me shaken up until this very day. This happened about 4 years ago at my then-girlfriend's house. She lives in the sticks of North Carolina, with the neighbors on either side about a half-mile away. Her parents and older brother were home, and for context, we were both 15 at the time. It was around 11 p.m. on a Saturday, and a car pulled up in their driveway. The headlights shined through my girlfriend's bedroom window, and we heard a car door shut. My girlfriend and I figured it was a family friend or someone who was coming to hang out and drink with their parents, so we honestly didn't pay much mind to it. About 10 minutes later, my ex's father comes into the room looking a bit frantic. He tells us to lock the windows and to grab her gun just to be safe. He walked out the front door, and we sat with her mom and brother in the kitchen. Her dad comes back around 2 minutes later, walks into his bedroom, comes out with a handgun, and walks out the front door once again. We had no idea what was going on, but soon we heard her dad yelling. Then he walks back inside, saying he took care of the situation. He told us that there was a car parked in the driveway with the headlights off and a person in the driver's seat. He said that he reached for the door handle, but the person looked up and whipped it in reverse out of the driveway. However, we thought that there was still someone in the woods because of the car door that we had heard, so he walked back outside with a flashlight and his gun. When he came back in, he told us to lock everything and for all of us to stay in one room. He said that as he was walking around the house, he shined his flashlight into the woods and there was a trail of reflectors that were stuck to the trees leading from the road to their house. He fired his gun a few times to hopefully scare them away. Thankfully, nothing else happened. It was a nerve-wracking experience nonetheless. Was this someone planning on robbing us, murdering us, or something else? I have no idea. But I'm glad we didn't have to find out. We all sat and slept in the living room together, and I left the next day. The reflector things were screwed into the trees, so this was definitely premeditated. Her father left them up for the night but took them down the next morning. I've recently begun helping my mom sell my childhood home, and it sparked the memory of possibly the scariest thing that's ever happened to me in my whole life. At the time, me and my friends were 15 years old. I grew up in a subdivision less than 20 minutes away from any towns. It was a very safe neighborhood, street lights on the corners, and lots of kids. Lots of my classmates lived there as well, and there was never any fear with us walking to each other's house or staying out after dark. My subdivision was about 3 miles long, and I lived at the very end of it. The last mile is a sharp right turn into a hill that has thick woods along both sides of the street with 4 houses at the bottom, all surrounded by the woods. My friend Maddie lived at the entrance of the subdivision. One year, we got about 8 inches of snow and ice. It shut down the roads entirely, and people were stranded. Schools were closed for at least a week. The first day of this snow, me, Maddie, and Kelly spent the whole day playing. We decided to have a big sleepover at Maddie's house that night. When the sun looked like it was starting to set, we started to trek down to my house to get an overnight bag. By the time we finished packing, it was dark out. The woods always enhanced the darkness, but it didn't bother us. The 3 of us were walking, joking, and enjoying the night air. As we cleared the top of the hill, we saw something that made us stop in our tracks. A hooded figure standing on the corner, illuminated by the streetlight. They didn't move. They just stood completely stiff, staring straight ahead. It was unsettling, but it easily could have been a neighbor, so with nervous laughs, we started descending the hill. The figure never moves though, staring straight ahead. As we got to the bottom, we could see the hood was fur-lined and they had some sort of black mask hiding their features. We started to get nervous. At this point, we're even with this person. It's blackout, and the one streetlight illuminating the corner is flickering. After staring at the figure for about 45 seconds, Maddie finally called out, "Hey, stop messing with us, it's not funny." At this point, the figure moved, only shuffling its feet to turn its body in our direction. They extended their hand towards us, and I swear time stopped. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. The figure gestured, "Come here," to us before turning and walking into the woods. We ran as fast as our feet would take us until we reached Maddie's house and deadbolted the door behind us. The next morning when I walked home, I stopped at the corner where the figure had been and felt pure, genuine fear. There were 2 tracks of footprints, one leading out of the woods and one leading back in. Thanks for listening to these allegedly true, creepy stories from the woods. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. I hope my sick voice didn't ruin the stories too much for you guys, and I do appreciate you guys supporting. If you guys have a story you would like to send in on a future video, be sure to do so by sending it in at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Hopefully, I'll be feeling better soon. I'm already feeling much better than I have over the past couple of days. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.